Good morning. My name is Ms. Delin Barongo. I'm a history teacher, having taught history for the last 8 years. I love history and I teach history with a lot of passion. I make history very interesting for my students. I teach with a lot of passion, and that gives me the energy to go to school every day and deliver history lessons. Today, I'm going to introduce to you a lesson about English Civil War. The lesson is for grade 7 students. The learning objective for this lesson is going to be exploring about the causes of English Civil War. So before I even begin my lesson, I have key important notes that I want to put emphasis. We have 3 success criteria that I want the learners to be able to try and achieve before the end of the lesson. So the success criteria is all linked up to the learning objective, and the success criteria, we have to start from the lowest to the highest in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy. So the first success criteria, I want the learners to be able to identify some of the causes of civil war. This is a very general question whereby at least a number of students can be able to be familiar or can be able to describe and express why they think civil wars are taking place in the society. And then the second success criteria, I want the learners to be able to explain the effects of these civil wars in the society. So having identified, so I want them now to be able to explain about the effects. We have a number of effects like loss of lives, destruction of property. So I want them to continue linking up. And then my highest success criteria, which is the last and the third success criteria, is now to analyze what were some of the causes of English Civil War. The third and highest success criteria is directly linked up with the learning objective. And I believe by the end of the lesson, most of the students could have really enjoyed and gotten to achieve the learning objective. So back to the lesson. So the first task when I get into a class is to begin with a do now task. The aim of the do now task is to motivate the learners to be able to capture the attention of the learners and also to arouse the interest of what the learners already know. So we are trying to build up the knowledge of what they know with the lesson of the day. So the first thing is display a set of 3 questions. So these questions are mixed ability. We have high ability questions and then I have low ability questions. So I'm trying to cater for the levels of all my students. So this question, the first question, I'll try to ask the learners to try and explain what they know about civil war. That's a question that I believe a number of students will try to attempt. And then another question, I want them to mention some of the causes of civil war. Why do you think we have a number of civil wars taking place in the society? That's another second question. And then the last question, which will be done by the low ability students, I want them to be able to describe or to be able to explain why they think people fight in the society. Maybe people fight because of food, people fight because of a number of reasons, definitely. So once I've given them this task is a task that is supposed to take at most 5 minutes. It's a written down task. And then I'll give them time to try and write the question down. And then I'll also get the feedback and see what they're able to answer. So by getting the feedback, I'll have the perspective of trying to understand what the learners already know about civil war. So then I'll go to the next slide or to the next activity of now trying to clearly give the clear definition of the word English Civil War. So I have to link up and give the information. And in this context, I'll try even to display pictures of English Civil War that were taking place. So by showing pictures, I'm trying to give learners to be able to have a clear glimpse of what was taking place. So in this context, we'll have pictures displaying the English Civil War that was taking place. I'll prompt questions about what do you think about the war, what were some of the effects, what were some of the materials that were being used in war, what were some of the kind of tools that were being used there. So I'll prompt a number of questions to try and create a picture about how the war looked like. So from that picture, I'm trying to build up my lesson and make it as interesting as possible. So having done that on my second slide, so I'll try now to go to the next slide whereby I'll try now to prompt and let learners to explain why they think these wars were taking place, having clearly explained about the English Civil War. Now I'll try to ask the learners, what do they think were some of the causes that led to the English Civil War? So having explained about some of those causes, I'll give learners time to try and at least write down at least 4 points in their notebook, some of the causes of English Civil War. Some of them were political, religious issues, social issues, and then we had a number of them. So by learners writing down the key or important notes in their books, I'll move to the next point and then try to ask the learners. So I want to make this a discussion whereby students will be pairing up in twos or threes, trying to discuss. So I'll prop a question as a progress check. What were some of the effects of these English civil wars that were taking place in the society? So I'll try to motivate the learners to try and engage in a discussion. The aim of this discussion is to help the students in terms of their communication, collaboration. Remember that we are trying to emphasize on the 21st century skills. So I'll give learners at least 4 or 5 minutes to try and discuss and then come up with some of the effects, having clearly understood, 1, the causes of English Civil War. So after highlighting some of those effects, which is an oral task, then now I'll bring up a differentiated task, which brings me to a point whereby the learners are able to express or be able to do some of those questions in their notebooks. So I'll give them different questions depending on their abilities. We have high ability students, we have middle ability students, and then we have low achiever, and then we have the students of determination. So I'll give them differentiated tasks, and these tasks, they're supposed to do them individually in their books. As a teacher, my role will be going around the class trying to see if the learners are able to answer these questions individually. Remember that even the students are allowed to use their devices. We're also trying to let the learners be able to use technology in terms of their research and even in their learning. So I'll try to help students as much as I can. And in this process, I'll also be doing marking and feedback. So by marking around, I'll be able to give them the correct answers on how they were supposed to answer. Once I'm done with marking and feedback, which is supposed to take approximately 8 to 12 minutes, then I'll just go and let the learners give now the answers. We have students who give very good answers, so I'll try to modify and let the students express on how a good answer looks like and how a bad answer looks like, and then we'll try to modify the bad answer into a good answer. So that way, we're trying to have all the learners get incorporated into the learning. So having done the differentiated task, so I'll move now into the plenary. The essence of the plenary task is to enable the learners express on what they have learned throughout the entire lesson. So the learners are able to express about their opinions. The plenary is a proper question whereby you're asking the learners on what they were able to learn. So throughout this, you're linking up your activities to the learning objective and the third success criteria, having in mind that most of the students were able to successfully finish the first and second success criteria. So we are aiming at moving a little bit high in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy. So this plenary task, we have 1 or 2 questions, and then we're trying to ask the students about some of the impacts of the English Civil War, some of the causes, and I'm trying to get the feedback from the students. So having successfully gotten the feedback, that assessment also helps me as a teacher to try and see how many students were able to reach the learning objective. So if I still realize that some of the students were not able to reach the learning objective, maybe half of the class, that calls for me as a teacher to try and arrange for a remedial session with them or backup activity so that the learners, or we try in the next lesson, do a recap so that all learners get to move at the same pace. So that is how I make my history lesson very interesting. That is how I engage my students, and that is how I always ensure that I'm making history as lively as possible. Thank you very much.